I see somewhere in the chat, Summer, you can't grow in knowledge if you approach everything thinking that you already know the answer. Exactly, right? So we talked about this a little bit last week, right? Imagine maybe somebody you know who thinks they've got it all figured out. Is that the kind of person that you tend to want to be? Those people we literally describe them as small, right? And we're not referring to their physical size. And again, I think that's comparative to what Russell's talking about, right? Becoming a bigger person, right? A smaller person. We're talking about your view of the world, right? The view that you carry around with you, right? You either go through the world, maybe like we've been saying, with some blinders on, and honestly, that can be very comfortable for some people, and that maybe that's how they, right? Maybe Ryan, that's how they avoid worrying about what other people think. It's like, I'm just going to live in my bubble, right? But some people say that, no, I still want to understand the world around me, as scary as it is, right? So there's different ways that one could approach that. And so the kind of uncertainty that Russell is advocating for is one where we still have to know what other people think. So we might not want to care what other people think, but we have to know, and we have to wonder why they have those reasons, right? And so as we're going to see, that's going to be especially important when it comes to these religious traditions, right? So one of the philosophical questions, right? And this is an area of philosophy that sort of crosses over all of the subdisciplines we've talked about so far, but that is philosophy of religion, right? And so in philosophy of religion, when we ask questions about God, we can be asking metaphysical questions. We can be asking logical questions. We can be asking axiological questions, or we can be asking epistemological questions, right? So we can ask whether or not God exists, right, as a fact. That would be a metaphysical question. Or we can ask just, are you rational in believing that God exists? Let's say we can't answer the metaphysical question, Let's say we can't know whether or not God exists for sure. Well, maybe you just need to be rational in believing in it. Okay, well, if all I need to do is be rational in believing that God exists, well, then why am I rational in believing that this God exists as opposed to this other God, right? Why do I think that this set of scriptures captures the truth of reality, right? The metaphysics, versus this set of scriptures? Why do I think that this tradition has a correct metaphysical view of the afterlife or the soul or the divine, or versus this tradition, right? So again, it's not which tradition you're choosing that philosophy is going to be ultimately concerned with, but the reasons behind it, right? And we can only get to those reasons by asking the questions, right? People who don't ask questions never need reasons to back up what they say, which is why it's such a red flag when you're not allowed to ask questions, right? Someone who has truly done the work of defending their position with good reasons should have absolutely no problem sharing those reasons with you, right? And encountering all of the possible critiques that you can muster, right? And so this is sort of the odd paradox of doing philosophy and religion. And then, of course, you all have the added benefit of us throwing gender into the mix. We haven't even gotten there yet. Get ready for the controversy, right? But the idea of questioning our religions already is, right, something people take very personally. But given that it's something you care so much about, don't you want to have the best possible reasons for defending those beliefs, right? If I cared about something, I wouldn't want it, being held up on some, very weak stilts of reasons. I would want a really strong foundation, so I knew that those beliefs would hold up against any critique that they came across, right? And so, right, the idea is that we should treat religious beliefs with the respect they deserve and question them, right? So in a lot of, unfortunately, real life situations, questions are not welcome. I actually had a former student who took, not this class, but my world religions class. And they were really excited because we were going to be looking at arguments for God's existence, right, from Christian philosophers. So they were super stoked, and they brought the textbook to their Bible study, and they were ready to show all these arguments for God, and they were asked to leave, right? It didn't matter that they weren't even disagreeing with the tradition. They were supporting it, right? They were going to be showing arguments in favor of a monotheistic Abrahamic conception of God. But the mere fact that they asked the question, the mere fact that they needed an answer or wanted an answer was frowned upon, right? And so this ends up being another discussion that often comes up, faith versus reason, right? So reason means that we're engaging in some sort of rational judgment, which means there are rules or standards, for assessing evidence, okay? Faith is to believe in something without evidence, right? Or in the absence of evidence. But here's the problem. A lot of people defend something else and they call it faith. A lot of people defend what is called dogma, and that is belief in something despite contrary evidence. Okay? So being faithful is not the same as being dogmatic, right? Faith is believing in something because you don't have enough evidence to support it, but you have faith nonetheless. Dogma is to say, well, I actually have a lot of evidence that goes against the belief, and I'm just going to ignore it and keep the belief anyways. Okay.